have a panel discussion with our wonderful presenters, Steve, Efrain, and Una. If you have any questions that you had from the presentation or just generally for these very knowledgeable representatives or on the topics from the presentation, you can go ahead and put those in the chat. And Sarah will be looking out in the chat for those questions so that we can be asking our presenters. As you all are thinking of your questions, though, maybe I can kick off with a question here. Are there any challenges or lessons learned that you have encountered while striving for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in your particular programs or projects? And maybe, well, I don't know if Una or Efrain or Steve, if any of you feel particularly moved to speak about that topic, but be happy to hear from all of you.
I'll speak a little bit. As I just said, our primary inclusion is the disabled community, and as it works out, we have recognition in our local area that we're sort of a go-to. We do activities. A lot of our people participate in year-round activities. Another way that we draw people is that our event is not unique. There are other disabled beach events throughout the coast now, but people in Santa Cruz have a relative or a friend away or even back east. Say, hey, you want to have a special day? Coming out to Santa Cruz on July 15th or whatever it is. So you get sort of an interesting mix of people. In some ways, reaching into the different BIPOC diversity communities does take some special considerations. And different communities deal with disabled population in different ways. And there is certain sensitivities in different segments of the community that we need to be conscious of to reach out to the Hispanic community and the Native American community and the Black community. That is not all, totally transparent. It does take some consciousness of making those connections with the families and the leadership. So the disability is sort of a cross section, but that's just one layer of identity.
Yeah, that makes me think a little bit about what Ephraim was talking about with kind of like making sure that your strategies are collaborative with the groups that you're trying to reach. Do you want to speak more on that, Ephraim, or the question more generally of challenges or lessons learned as you strive for this DEIA practices?
Yeah, I can give it a go. Thanks for starting this off, Steve. Definitely plays a role in this, I'd say, collaborations and doing your due diligence to effectively do outreach with Black, Indigenous, and communities of color. And I'd say kind of like the context or what underpins this is for just outside as an intermediary giving money to people doing the work on the ground. What we've noticed from our perspective that it's really, really simple. What's the biggest challenge, which is the legacy of redlining and racist city planning has left Black, Indigenous, and people of color just tremendously in really tremendously bad circumstances when it comes to access. And to us, what it means to be able to build power and make change to address that specifically, we recognize that the government works at a snail pace when it comes to addressing those needs. And so it's a matter of building power and creating local change through the organizations we support through our philanthropic giving. And to do that, I think you were referring to it, Aaron, in my presentation about collaborations. To effectively address those, you need Black, Indigenous, and people of color to have their voices centered in that decision-making process when initiatives and organizations are being built, because they've lived those unfortunate redlining and racist city planning circumstances. And so, yeah, maybe I'll pass it over to you, Una.
Yeah, I would concur with that. Like for us in our leadership and our board, we have tribal members, you know, so when programs being developed, that's being developed within the community, because that's that whole piece of humility. You don't really know what you don't know, to provide what a community would feel is a help, right? Or a collaborative partnership. So, you know, that for us in our program, everything we did was, there was like a million check-ins, right? And there was like lots of meetings. There was that trust building that we did for years, growing that. And then having staff and board members from those communities that you're serving, and not just the diversity of you know, financials too. Like we have working poor, and we have, you know, this is all sorts of financial class, and all diversities in the leadership or make the decision making groups, you know. So I think that's really a key part too, is when you're designing programs or running programs, that it's coming from the community that the programs are serving.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. We're starting to get some audience questions. So I have, this is one that I believe is particular to Una, but if you know, if others have insight on it as well. So it says, for projects awarded to nonprofits with tribal partners, does the SCC require subcontracts and or waivers for tribal partners, especially for projects that involve outdoor activities? That first part, I'm not as sure what was meant by subcontracts there, so I can't answer for the SCC part. But Una, did you explore this during the Exploring Coastal Como Nation Lands project? And if so, what did you do?
So we definitely had some waivers, and we were very, very, very careful about photo release and any kind of release in media. Like that is super important. So we also worked in collaborative with the community planning and environmental EPA programs. So our programs were kind of merged. So the tribal EPA and their community projects had goals where they needed to take more kids outside. So we had some cost share and some collaborative work with our project with the State Coastal Conservancy. So some of that was taken. We did have staff from the Middletown Rancheria of Como, California there as well. So I think that because we were not just providing a program, but we're collaborating on a program, that really helped with the regulatory and the legal liability issues. But if
this is Mike. That was my question. Thank you, Anna. I appreciate your insight on that. And I'm actually sending you my email through the chat. If you could provide that, I'd be interested to see what form of the waiver. I mean, it's a bummer. These trips are awesome and the kids and people deserve it, but we also live in a litigious society. So just wondering, kind of that was my angle too. Sometimes that's just the reality of doing business. And the part about subcontracting with the Coastal Conservancy, we were the applicant for the grant that we received, but we're partnering with the Hamul Indian Village. So more from a contractual processing point of view. I didn't know if the Coastal Conservancy requires us, because our tribal partners are being paid out of this funding, if the Coastal Conservancy requires some kind of contract or some kind of paper link to the project as funds are allocated and distributed. That was my question related to the Coastal Conservancy.
Yeah, I can speak to that part. Anyone you're paying for work, direct project work under your grant, needs to be an approved subcontractor. The process is just to, in your work program, we'll discuss this later, but you'll provide the details of the person or this entity you're paying through the subcontract, and it's a short scope of work sentence of what they're handling. and your project manager will review that and usually approve it. And once that's in the work program officially, you can pay them through the grant.
Awesome.
And if you have a subcontract available, you can provide that too.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for that question. I think we have time maybe for one more. We did have one more from the audience, so this will be for all three of you. The sustainability and growth of the Explore the Coast programming requires leveraging Coastal Conservancy funding for additional resources, more funding, in-kind support, volunteer engagement, etc. What is the strategy of each presenter for bringing in additional resources key for the long-term success of this work?
I'll just speak to our experience, and I would say your best friend is the local newspaper. You can get a nice article, a picture of your activity. They love to put that in the paper. Here's some feel-good news. There's not enough of that. And the community sees, because at your best, you're going to reach, a very finite segment of the community. You get an article or a picture in the newspaper, because these activities are all very photogenic. Paper would love to get a photograph, and that, you've just reached thousands of people, and that opens a lot of doors. I'm just feeling a little positive about this, that we had an event, accessibility of the local pool, which we got a grant for a pool chair, and we invited the paper to cover it, and got a beautiful article and picture on the front page of the paper on Monday that is going to make our fundraising a heck of a lot easier. There's a local event, I don't know if you all have something like this, Santa Cruz Gives, that is a very nice inclusive community organization at the end of the year. And that's really your groundwork community fundraising. So that's one end. The other is it gives you the publicity to reach out to the foundations and the businesses. So it's not just you promoting yourself, but you getting other people to promote you opens those doors.
Yeah, I think it's that you can get a diversified stream of funding from the pilot project that you're getting here if you're a first-time grantee like us, from the State Coastal Conservancy for the Explore the Coast program, and that shows success. And then you can leverage that for sponsorships or any major donors that you have. The community partners that you're working with, we can have collaborations on grant writing as well for all sorts of different foundations, government grants, and more. Getting youth outdoors is, there's definitely funding for that, and getting families outdoors to underserved communities and historically underrepresented communities out there. So I think that the assets that you create, you don't want to, you want to use those delicately and strategically so that you can create more funding. I've had some meetings with major donors who love that this project is bringing people capacity to go out and to the coast where they've always been going, providing some more money. So we're probably going to get some major donors from the project, and the tribe wants to do this every year. They're like, this group, this gathering was, as you saw in that quote, they haven't been able to really do it out there at the coast since they were kids, and they want to do it every year now. So we're going to be having a willing partner to help us write grants. We can get letters of support from them. So establishing that partnership, I think it's going to help us get sustainable funding.
Yeah, and I'll go really quick to dovetail y'all. Una, I 100% agree with leveraging the award and any association you have with reputable organizations. At this point, I can say Justice Outside has a decent reputation, Coastal Conservancy, and using that to catalyze yourself into other applications. In fact, Liberated Paths has a focus on on early stage initiatives and organizations, and we have dozens of people who have been able to leverage their first gift, official gift from Justice Outside, to then within the next year or two get several more. And so that's really key. I'd say I guess it depends what kind of work is being done. But in the case of Justice Outside, if you're working with organizations and building up organizations' capacity to be long-term and sustainable, capacity building, again, I'm a huge fan of capacity building with specific components that are related to funding, coaches, consultations and trainers who are focused in on community-centric fundraising strategies has been really supportive for a lot of the people we're building power with. And for a lot of initiatives or organizations on the ground who are a little smaller and have limited capacity, recommending and tapping into different, whether it's fiscal sponsors or capacity building organizations such as Resilia, who actually we're in partnership with through some funding through the Hewlett Foundation, who provides specific like fundraising capacity building and will actually look for grants, apply for grants, check in with you on your behalf before they submit the application. That's been super successful for some of our grantees as well, is them looking for creative ways to build capacity in applying.
Wonderful. Thank you all very much for your thoughtful answers. Thank you to the questions that we got. And I think we are at time. So once more, thank you to our wonderful presenters, and I'll hand back off to Lexi.
Awesome. Thank you to Aaron and Sarah for facilitating that conversation, and to our amazing presenters, and to everyone who participated in the panel discussion. Now we will be splitting you all into some new breakout rooms for 10 minutes to discuss a few questions.